This tutorial will cover rudiment aspects of word order in the German language. We will cover word order in questions and statements in part 1. And in part 2, we'll cover word order when using coordinating or subordinating conjunctions. At this point in the course, you've already been exposed to multiple scenarios of varying word order. For example, in week 1, you learned how to say hello and introduce yourself by saying something to this effect: Ich heiße Stefan, or Ich studiere Germanistik. In both of these statements, the grammatical elements are broken down as follows: subject, verb, predicate. The subject is the first example. In this first example is ich, the verb is heiße, and the predicate, or rest, of the sentence is Stefan. This is a fairly standard word order to implement when expressing a statement, though it can change depending on the emphasis you have in mind. But let's look at some other examples of how to structure the word order, starting with questions. Okay, in these examples we have two questions. Regnet es noch? And scheint die Sonne heute? Looking at the previous examples of statements, which both started with the subject ich, these questions both begin with a verb, regnet and scheint, respectively. That is a key difference between a statement and question. The statement will typically start with a subject, but can also be something else, for example, a direct object, adjective, preposition, etc., as long as the verb is in the second position, while questions will begin with the verb, regnet, for instance, as we just saw. Okay? Or with a question word, for example, was machst du heute? Or wann beginnt der Film? As you can see, these questions begin with the question words was, what, and wann, when. Then follows the verb, followed by the subject, and followed by the rest of the question. Let's look at the following examples of question words. Wann, warum, was, wer, wie, wie viel, wie viele, wo, woher, wohin. It is important to understand the word order in questions, both when using a question word and when not using a question word. Just remember that regardless if your question starts with either, that they precede the subject. Saying something by starting with the subject or something other than a question word or verb creates a statement. Let's now turn back to some word order basics in statements. As I mentioned earlier, statements typically begin with the subject of a sentence. I've also mentioned you can begin a statement with another grammatical element as long as it's not a verb. As this may result in a confusing understanding of word order, let's focus on the basics for now. As this may result, once you've reached a comfortable level with German, then you can start playing around with the word order. But for now, we'll stick to the rudiments. As we discussed in week 2, the nominative case, statements include a subject, verb, and predicate, also known as the other or rest of the sentence. For example, das Thermometer zeigt nur 10 Grad. You can see in our slide here how each of these elements are identified grammatically. Das Thermometer being the subject, zeigt being the verb, and nur 10 Grad the rest of the statement. Now, let's say we want to start with another element that is not the subject, which we can do for now without overcomplicating matters. Heute zeigt das Thermometer nur 10 Grad. Here we started with a time element, heute, but notice that the verb is still in the second position, followed by the subject, followed by the rest of the statement. Again, and I'll reiterate, it is important to remember that the verb is always in the second position in a statement, regardless of starting with the subject or another element of speech. Since we used a time element, heute, okay, in the previous example, let's talk briefly about time elements in statements. Generally, the rule is time precedes place. For instance, gehst du jetzt in die Bibliothek? Nein, ich gehe jetzt in die Kneipe. Now, you'd still be understood if you didn't place the time element in the exact spot if you were in a German-speaking country. But it's a good rule to abide by when using time, that it goes before the location, as is the case in these two examples. Okay. Another important element of word order is when you negate something using the word nicht. Okay, before we talk about nicht, however, we'll highlight another word used to negate items, that is kein. Okay, for example, das ist kein Buch. That's not a book. Alright, kein will be used to replace the indefinite article, as was the case here. Okay, but let's shift our focus to negating words or expressions such as adjectives, adverbs, prepositional phrases, where the word nicht is used and is placed directly before the word or expression. Okay? For example, es ist nicht kalt. Es ist nicht sehr windig. Ich gehe nicht in die Disco. Ich gehe nicht oft in die Disco. Ich gehe nicht mit Bernd in die Disco. In the first two examples, nicht precedes the adjectives to indicate it is not cold and that it is not very windy. Okay? In the next two, nicht is used to indicate that ich is not going to the disco and that ich does not go often to the disco. In the last example, ich is not going with Bernd to the disco. Poor Bernd. So it's fairly simple. If you want to negate something with nicht, place it before the item you wish to negate. And that concludes part 1 of word order tutorials. Stay tuned for part 2, which will highlight word order with coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. Danke!